Well, tonight we get to discuss something that I have been so excited about, and that is postmodernism, which is the era that we live in now, and truth. To them, there is no such thing as objective truth. That's why you hear a lot of people today talk about my truth, your truth, their truth, but there is no objective truth, which in itself is stating an objective truth. But anyway, so I've been kind of excited to talk about that because we hear a lot about that on television and radio, and I'm just so excited to talk about it. So, since I was a kid, since y'all were kids questions have changed. Back then, children asked questions like, what was it like to walk on dry land after Moses parted the Red Sea? But when this one child's first question was not about walking on dry land, what was it like, or how many miles, this, that, and the other. It was, Mom, did those miracles really happen? Our kids, like 1,000% smarter than us, y'all think they're really smarter than us?
I think they are.
We think they are. Maybe, but intelligence probably isn't an issue here. Rather, the philosophy has changed. Our respective cultures influence what questions we ask and why we ask them. As G.K. Chesterton observed, people usually have one of two things, either a complete and conscious philosophy or the unconscious acceptance of the broken bits of some incomplete and shattered and often discredited philosophy. He went on to note that it's these broken bits of ideas that, when uncritically absorbed, do the most damage. When we were kids, people still generally assumed that both morality and truth existed and it could be known. You didn't hear anything like my truth, your truth. You heard, well, that's the truth. It didn't occur to us to question the supernatural events of the Bible, at least not as children, but with the dawning of postmodernism, even kids' questions are changing, and we might be tempted to think that it's a weird phase. It's not. These questions are important, and unless we learn how to address them in a way that makes sense to the next generation, our kids will stop asking, and we don't want them to stop asking questions, even though we might think we do. For them to stop inquiring usually means one of three things. One, they have disengaged completely. Two, they have made up their mind in a direction they know we won't like. Or three, they've given up on us and will pose their questions to someone else or the all-knowing Google. We all have a philosophy, whether we realize it or not. Even saying I don't have a philosophy is in itself a philosophy. In other words, we all live our lives by certain assumptions, by basic beliefs about how the world operates. Is there a God? Are good and evil real? What is truth? And is there an afterlife? These are life's ultimate questions, and we should make sure that our answers are rooted in the truth and not cultural trends. Remember the parable Jesus taught about the wise and foolish builders? What did he say in that?
Would you like me to tell you or sing it to you?
You can tell me or sing it, whichever one you prefer.
The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the foolish man built his house upon the sand.
Right.
And when the rains came down and the floods came up, the rains came and the house on the sand was washed away. The house on the rock stood firm. So the point is, it matters what foundation you're building your life upon.
Right.
If you're building it on real truth, something that's truly solid, or are you building it on something that's fluff? Right.
So the philosophy we've been discussing, including what we're going to talk about tonight, postmodernism, which is what we live in now, would y'all say that is a foundation built upon the sand? Yes, definitely. Definitely.
I watch, who is the young guy that has debates all the time? Charlie Kirk.
I watch him too.
I
love
enjoy
it.
watching that.
Charlie Kirk's really good.
I mean, he has got some answers that he comes back with.
Isn't that the
He
truth?
never has any materials in front of
He's good.
I think Trey gets tired of saying, Trey, look, watch this trailer. Because I get in phases where I just watch tons of them. I'll sit in the evening and just watch them. And they're all so good, though. They really are. They're so good.
Well, with postmodernism, our world currently is trying its best to build a solid foundation on sand. The problem, it doesn't even try to build on the sand. Postmodernism actually builds on thin air. Postmodernists simply do not trust foundations, even the sandy ones. In fact, the more solid or fundamental a belief, the more skeptical they become. They want to tear such beliefs apart in what is called deconstructionism. If you plan on sending your kids to college, and especially if they major in a field of humanities like history, English, or philosophy, they will be steeped in postmodernism assumptions from the get-go. Some in the sciences proudly proclaim that the humanities are dead. To this we cry foul. The humanities are not dead. They are just really, really sick, and postmodernism is the disease. So we have to talk a little bit about the history of postmodernism. All right, remember we discussed naturalism, and we discussed the pre-modernist who viewed everything as being done by gods. There was no scientific explanation for anything. And then came along the scientific revolution, and man realized that he was in fact capable of understanding nature and even harnessing it for the use of science to discover the laws of the universe, and assumed that the same process could be used to discover immaterial truths as well. Purpose, meaning ethics, morality, even boldly declared that these mysteries were no longer discoverable through logic and the scientific method. The modernists were convinced that by pooling their collective common sense, logic, reason, and science, an objective standard of truth, morals, and meaning would organically emerge. Did they deliver? No. Science proved, in the naturalism chapter, as in the modernist chapter and anything else, science proved to be just as dogmatic and dangerous as religion. Enter postmodernism. Disenchanted with the failings of modernism, the postmodernists did what all disillusioned young lovers do and started racking up a list of their former beloved flaws, starting with their inconsistencies. On one hand, modernists held unquestioning confidence in materialistic naturalism. That is, believed that truth could only be found through what we were able to study with our five senses. So they thought you could seek the truth to morality and everything else, just everything we can feel and touch. Modernists thought you could find truth that way. Well, obviously they didn't. But they also had an unwavering conviction that human reason, something that cannot be studied with the five senses, was also trustworthy. If purely materialistic evolution is true, my brain evolved to give me survival, not truth. So in other words, if our brains are logic and reason and they evolved to be that, then we really can't trust whatever philosophies that they would come up with either, can we? The postmodernists were at a crossroad. They could either question the dogma of naturalism, but in doing so they would allow a divine footprint back in the door, or they could deny that absolute truth existed and was knowable. Unfortunately, of questioning the dogma of naturalism, they rejected the whole idea of truth. Postmodernists rejoiced that nobody could declare that sex outside of marriage, abortion, or homosexuality were objectively immoral. However, what they didn't realize was that they also now prevented society from saying that unprovoked murder, torture, or sex slavery were objectionably wrong. If there is no such thing as truth, and there is only opinion on certain matters, you can't say that anything is immoral as a whole. Only you see that as immoral. I see that as immoral, but they may not see that as immoral. See where that idea of your truth and my truth starts to come into play there? Because there is no the truth. If there is no objective, absolute truth, absolute right or wrong, then no one can criticize or condemn any moral choices, however evil. So what does a society like that look like? You can do or be whatever you feel like. Now what is, huh? What?
Chaos.
Oh yeah,
It
chaos.
would just be chaos.
It would be chaos. But I mean, isn't that where we are today? If there is no objective truth, if there is no absolute right or wrong, then people can say and do whatever they feel like. Which means if I don't feel like I'm a man anymore, and I feel like I'm this, then by gosh, my truth is I am that, and you need to accept it. Isn't that where we are today?
And today, sometimes I wonder, do you really not know any better? Or are you just saying, I don't care how it's brought up or what truth is?
Right. Well, in there,
Sometimes it's just, I don't care. As long as
Yeah.
this is what I think is okay.
and that all stems from postmodernism. In other words, well, this suits you just fine, but it doesn't suit me. And since there is no truth as a whole, then, well, I'm going to do what I want to do. You do what you want to do. And no embarrassment at all. Absolutely. Mhm.
Don't even try to hide it.
Absolutely. Because there is no right or wrong. There's only opinion. So here we go into postmodernism and truth. Postmodernism is inextricably tied to truth. Does it exist? And if so, can it be known? So let's talk a little bit about the differences between objective truth and subjective truth. Do y'all know the difference? Objective truth and subjective truth.
Objective truth is truth. It can be proven
Right.
beyond a shadow of a doubt.
It's the truth.
Right.
It applies to everything and everybody.
From like something as simple as this chair
Right.
is hard, the metal is hard, but the fabric is soft.
Right.
Like, that is just truth. That
Right.
is what it is. It can't be changed.
The sky is blue.
Right. The subjective truth is based on my feelings.
Yeah. Or the subject.
Right.
You being the subject, me the subject. Subjective truth, my truth. Your truth, right? So objective truth is another way of saying absolute truth. They are absolute truths and are statements or beliefs that are true for all people at all times and in all situations. Right? It's the truth. It doesn't matter what your opinion on the matter is. This is the truth. On the other hand, subjective truth is based on the person, the subject. Well, I say the sky is orange, and so to me, the sky is orange, and to you, the sky is blue, and we're both right, and you have no right to tell me that I'm wrong, because that is my truth, and I'm going to live my truth, right? Up until recently, our postmodern culture said that all truth statements were in the subjective realm. We can't say abortion is wrong. Rather, we can only say abortion is wrong for me. However, there is a world of difference between those two statements. I would say so, wouldn't y'all? One is definitely objective truth, and one is subjective truth. As we talk to our children about important issues, we must understand the difference. When we tell them Christianity is true, their postmodern mindset might be tacking on a silent "for you" at the end of the statement. When you say that something is true or right or wrong, they may agree for now. You might even see them dutifully nodding in agreement. However, if we don't get a handle on this postmodernism thing early, we might end up with a teenager, 20-something, who is completely respectful of all of your views. Get that? All of your views. They're not mine, they're yours. And if they, and they are fine with those things being true for you, but they're not fine with them being true for them. If they have uncritically absorbed the lies of postmodernism, they will enter their young adult years trying to figure out their truth to build on, all while being totally respectful of your truth. Until you try to claim that your truth should be theirs, then we're going to have pushback. For parents whose children have been disobedient all through their growing up years, this has come as a shock. Obedient all through their growing up years. This has come as a shock. These parents thought they were helping their children build a foundation of truth and were completely unaware that, with postmodernism, their children would later reinterpret this activity as what developmental psychologists call parallel play. You do your thing, I'll do mine. They reinterpret all your teachings as you showing them your foundation and your truth, not the truth. And postmodern principles are insidious in that way. They are like viruses that lay dormant for years. We might not even know our kids are infected until it's too late. That is why we need to expose the lies early and show how a postmodern mindset leads to chaos, not freedom. So now postmodernism in the university. Boy, that is a lot. That is a bed infesting with postmodernism. In pre-modern times, universities were founded for the purpose of teaching students objective truths of the world. Schools nowadays have a new truth that they are promoting. Objective truths are just power plays. And that's what they're saying. Tolerance, diversity, autonomy, and fairness are the highest virtues to which all others must bow. That's what they teach. According to philosopher Stephen Hicks, postmodern professors' primary role is now to teach students how to identify political oppression, particularly those of their own Western culture, where the primary perpetrators are males, white, and the rich, who have used power cruelly to at the expense of women, racial minorities, and the poor. So when your child comes home from his or her first semester at college and proudly proclaims that your Christian beliefs are merely a social construct used by white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant men to exert control over women and minorities, you can think postmodernism. Boy, don't we hear a lot of that stuff in the news. Because objective truth is been used as a power play just from white, rich men, Christians, to subdue the world, specifically women and racial minorities. And the one thing that people must bow to are tolerance, diversity, autonomy, and fairness. Those are the highest things that we must everything else must give way to.
I wonder what those people would say, though, about, like, all black churches that have no white influence.
They'd find an excuse for it.
Or churches in Africa. Not all churches in Africa are started by white missionaries.
Right.
It's kind of like the ones that we know that are called Uncle Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
They go along with white, I think.
Right.
Not like any of that.
What about churches in South America? It's a very Christian area. They're not white.
Right.
But they're still very religious.
I don't know what they would say. In many ways, our educational system is split along the lines of modernism in the sciences and business schools and postmodernism in the humanities. I would say that's pretty true. Let's be honest, even in our own minds, we tend to unknowingly flip between these two views of truth. We unquestionably swallow anything said in an article that starts with "scientific studies show," but begin our Bible studies with, "What does this verse mean to you?" Not even the church has escaped the lies of postmodernism. So what do we do about it? Well, for starters, we need to recognize the message. We must deconstruct any truth claim to show bias. A truth claim isn't necessarily a lie. Isn't necessarily true. Like the phrase suggests, it is just something that someone claims is true. I can say Well, the truth is the sky is orange. I'm claiming that to be true, but does that make it necessarily true? No. It is very easy to be sucked into truth claims that aren't actually true. The postmodern way of dealing with such claims is to deconstruct the statement, starting with the person who says it. A postmodern who is trying to dismiss a truth claim will do so by figuring out the supposedly hidden biases the person making the claim. Hidden biases of the person making the claim. This is done to show that this truth is really just that person's version of the truth. Use I feel instead of I think. That's something else we'll hear postmodernists say. I feel versus I think. Well, I feel this, I feel that, and that is their truth, right? And we all have to accept it. There are times when this is necessary, but postmodernists have demanded that all truth statements start this way. Consider this. How many times you have heard someone say, use your feelings language? We cannot say you acted disrespectfully when you spit in my face. No. Rather, we must say, I felt disrespected when you spit in my face. That's an extreme example, but it should get the point across, because I truly think, not feel, that in this culture it is objectively disrespectful to spit in someone's face on purpose. That's just my opinion. Nobody knows for sure. Another one here. The main thesis of postmodernism is that because we all have slightly different perspectives, we can't trust any one perspective. Because everybody else has a perspective on something, we can't trust any of them. Who knows whose perspective aligns the closest to reality? Is it the white, middle-class Protestants in America? The ancient Incan sun worshippers from Peru? Postmodernism treats us all like naughty school children who can't play nicely with the truth. Everyone was fighting over whose truth was truest. So postmodernism came along and said, because you can't play nice with your truth claims, nobody gets to play with them. Nobody gets to claim to know the truth. There. Now you can all get along. Or how about you have to figure it all out for yourself? According to postmodernism, the meaning of life ultimately comes down to one thing. Y'all remember the movie City Slickers? Y'all seen City Slickers? There's a cowboy on there who tells the city guy, he says, you got that one thing, and you have to find it. Nobody can tell you what it is. You have to find it. That's the meaning of life. Well, that goes with you got to figure it out for yourself. It's all up to you. You can decide for yourself. Who wouldn't want to hear that? Truth is whatever you want it to be. That's quite the ear-tickling philosophy, isn't it? So we have to offer discernment. So far, we've mostly highlighted the negative aspects of postmodernism. Before we talk about the lies, let's first tip our hats to some of the good that postmodernism has brought. First, postmodernism ideas influence the church to give up on some of the negative effects of modernism. Modernists assumed that all people would see things the same way if they just used their reasoning abilities. What a sad, monochromatic looking church that must have produced, denying our individual perceptions and perspectives. Second, postmodernists placed a practical limit on what human reason was capable of. Reason can be used to argue for God's existence or to question it, but reason alone can't be used to paint a complete picture of God and salvation. Finally, postmodernism has revealed to us the rich diversity that God delights in, especially through worship. But the damage that postmodernism has wrought cannot be overstated. Like most philosophical corrections, it's swung too far in the opposite direction. What are some lies it smuggles? What are some of the lies it smuggles into our way of thinking? postmodernism? What are some lies that it tells us and how we think?
There can be no truth.
There can be no truth.
And I think that's especially difficult to fight with people who don't have some kind of religious background
Right.
at all. I mean, they don't have to be Christian, but if you're Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, you have a foundation of things that you believe to be
Mhm.
truth, and you can go at philosophy with them. You know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But with somebody who doesn't have some kind of worldview like that, that gives them a foundation to start on, it becomes very hard when they've been brought up learning that there is no true truth.
Right. So here are some others. Our perceptions determine reality. How about that lie? For postmodern, that's what it says. Our perception of things determine the reality. I perceive that the government is biased against name whoever. Well, if I perceive it, then it's got to be true. How much of that do we see and hear in the news every day, right? Yeah, a lot. Absolutely. The basic definition of truth is that which corresponds to reality. In other words, truth is telling it like it is. So if our perceptions determine reality, and the truth is that which corresponds to reality, then we are essentially saying that our perceptions determine truth. Think about all the implications of this. All determinations of right and wrong are based on people's subjective experiences. Again, what was that word you said? Liam said? Chaos? Chaos. Chaos. What used to be innocent Freudian slips are now microaggressions. If you approach a girl who feels like a boy and say she, you can be charged with a hate crime. At least in Canada, and it's not far off from us. Did y'all know that? That way of thinking is becoming more common in the U.S. No one is safe, and there is no room for misunderstandings. That's very true. We said all the time, there is no room for misunderstandings. No room for mistakes. Ultimately, this is the world that postmodernism gives us. Two. All truth claims are power plays. Let me rephrase it. All objective truth claims are power plays. It's just somebody trying to get power over you by telling you the truth. In debates, there is a logical fallacy called poisoning the well. To poison the well is to attack someone's character by pointing out that person's alleged flaw. And this flaw is so egregious that no one would trust anything else that person says. Sound familiar? For example, what if someone you really trusted said, "Be careful with Bob. He is a master manipulator. There's always an agenda with him." How difficult would it be for you to trust anything Bob said after that? Taking it to the real world, what if a teacher or professor made you really believe that all truth claims are power plays? What if it made you really believe that? What's going to happen? What is your knee-jerk reaction when the professor says that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life? If a professor really makes you think that objective truth statements are power plays, and Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," what's going to happen if you have that thinking on? You're going to say, "What's he after?" Aren't you? What's he trying to do? What's he trying to get from me? Think about it. For the postmodernist, those are threatening words. But Christianity is ultimately about truth. The truth of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and the moral truths that he taught. If it all gets reduced to power plays, then we have no basis for determining right or wrong. Or line number 3, all truth is subjective. That's what we've been starting since the first page of this chapter. All truth is subjective truth. There is no objective truth. This is the thesis of postmodern thought. Even if there is such a thing as truth, There is no way to know for sure.
Pray just the extent of that now.
Oh, I know.
The other day, Joey was telling me he was carrying Edie to the ninth grade,
Mm-hmm.
first grade, and a little friend of hers was riding with him. And Joey said he heard the little boy say, Edie, how many fuzzies do you think's going to be in our ninth grade? I said, fuzzies? What's fuzzies? And Joey said, Mama, some of those kids think they're cats.
Are you serious?
Terry told me, I
Oh, my
was
word.
telling her, she said, oh, Mama, in some schools, they are wanting litter boxes even in the schools.
Well, they feel like a cat, and my truth is my truth, yours is yours. So, you know,
I said, well, I'd be willing to be not close to them because they're
and that's the truth.
berserk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everything else.
I wouldn't be surprised. What are they doing in school? Shouldn't they be in the vet's office or somewhere?
They said that you got, if you're going to let them decide whether they're male or female, you have to let them decide whether they're cats or dogs.
Well, that's it right there. Because if feeling is truth, and there is no such thing as objective truth, only what my truth and your truth. All right, what's to stop anybody from saying, well, I'm a cat, I'm a dog, I'm this, I'm that, or what's anybody stop from saying, well, you know,
I'm a doctor.
yeah, I'm a gun, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm black, I'm white, I'm
That's
this,
the
I'm
one
that.
Gets people right there. You can say you want to be anything you want to be until you're a white person saying, well, I identify as black. And then all of a sudden, you can't identify as that.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why can't I?
But-
You need to
But
put
that's the
it out.
slippery slope of all of this. If there is no objective truth, then you just fall down and this, that, and the other. So all truth is subjective. Lie number 3. So a fun experiment. When people say all truth is subjective, ask them, is that truth subjective? So if they say all truth is subjective, are they not making an objective truth statement? And if all truth is subjective, then even that statement must be subjective, right? If they say yes, then their statement is false. If they say no, their statement is still false. Not that our goal is to win arguments, but if we can keep bad ideas from spreading, we can call that a win. So we must argue for a healthier approach. When it comes to teaching our kids, we can counteract these lies by pointing out the inconsistencies. Luckily, most of postmodern thought is self-defeating because it's just, it's so far out there, it's ridiculous. And it isn't hard to demonstrate that even to kids. All right, so here's a fabulous story about a woman and a conversation she had with her daughter, Dylan. One day, Dylan was mad at me for making her follow certain rules. She announced, when I grow up, I'm going to have no rules. I told her that if she wanted to change or get rid of rules, that was fine. But would she allow everyone to kill each other? She said, well, okay, that would be the only rule. Then I said, would you let people punch each other for no reason? She said, okay, but only those 2 rules. Then I said, what about stealing? Would you allow that too? Exasperated, she replied, okay, but only those 3 rules. The conversation went on like this for a few more minutes, and she ended up basically agreeing to all the rules I already had expected for her to follow. Then I pointed out, it sounds like you would make the rules to be quite a bit like they already are. Maybe rules are a good thing. She had no choice but to agree. Most of postmodernism's claims can be turned on themselves. Truth claims are power plays. Well, are you claiming that to be true? What kind of power do you get from such a statement, right? So, and that's again, that is an objective truth. And is there, well, are you saying that's the truth? But I thought all truth was subjective, right? Or if any claim of the truth is a power play, trying to get something from someone else or take power, then what are you trying to get for saying that? Actually, a lot. Are you saying that it is objectively true that all truth is subjective? Again, does perception define reality, or is that just your perception? Helping our kids to understand the difference between absolute and subjective truths is key to helping them avoid the traps of postmodernism. The claims of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are absolute because they are based on real historical events. Your children's favorite color, flavor of ice cream, or chosen profession are subjective because they are based on your kids' preferences. When it comes to matters that are not absolute, preferred dress, customs, worship styles, ask your kids why they think God created almost 200 different varieties of roses. Maybe He likes diversity more than we thought. We can praise the Lord in diverse ways without relegating ancient creeds and doctrines to the dustbins of archaic opinion. There is a difference between core truths and peripheral truths. And it's important that we know how to tell the difference between the two. Wouldn't y'all say? Between our preferences versus what is real, what is true. So reinforce through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. Find examples in culture. Postmodern artists tend to revel in meaningless, divorcing their art from any deliberate meaning. If the art is asking the viewer to ask questions or figure out what it means to them, there's a good chance you're looking at postmodern art. Scope out examples of postmodern architecture on Pinterest sometime. Those buildings have all sorts of wild configurations above ground, signifying absurdity, rebellion, and irreverence. All of these are common themes of postmodernism. Point out to your kids that underground, these supposedly postmodern buildings have the same traditional foundations every other building needs to stand upright. We can also find many examples of postmodern assumptions in popular culture, especially children's programming. Live your truth. Or that. Follow your heart. These are the epitome of postmodern messages. Teach children to recognize these messages and see them for what they are, critically and compassionately, because the people pushing them are confused. Such messages sound empowering because they allow the subject, that is them, the person, the individual, to create meaning. Ask them who gets to decide which meaning is correct. Isn't it more fun and useful to find the real meaning of an idea, a word, a concept, or belief, rather than declaring that all answers are correct, regardless of their differences, and whether they contradict one another? Help your kids see that truth is not a power play, a threat, or a hate crime. Ultimately, truth is a person. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He also said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. This is wonderful news to share with the world. And discern the difference between objective and subjective truths. When you read the Bible with your kids, let your first question be, what was the author trying to say to his audience? Instead of, what does this passage mean to you? Even that's something we often hear in churches, but that's really something from postmodernism. What does this passage mean to you, right? Versus, what does this passage say to, what's he trying to say to the audience? What is Paul in Romans trying to say to the Romans? Yes, the Word is living and active, and it speaks to us today. However, our first goal in understanding the Bible should be to discover what it meant to the people from whom it was originally written. That's when we do Bible studies. We have to take time to understand the meaning, who he was writing to, what was he writing about, what was he writing for, and then how does that apply to us today? Make sure your children understand and value this message first before they move on to the application. Any questions? I know, right? I mean, that that is, I've been looking forward to that one just because, I mean, it really speaks to everything we saw in there, we see in our culture. Everything.
And it's gone so much further than, who would have ever thought that somebody would say that they were a boy when they were a girl?
Oh, I know. Or a cat, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And whoever thought that you'd be charged with a hate crime for telling a little boy they're a little boy and not a little girl?
Or a boy and not a cat.
That's right.
Or a boy, yeah. Or
I mean, that's even more insane, that you can get in trouble for telling a human being that they are not a cat.
Yeah.
Because they're too sensitive, they can't handle the truth.
but it's not truth. Their truth is they're a cat, and they feel like a cat. So by gosh, you have to recognize their truth.
And how could you know to call somebody a they them?
Right.
Like you heard in some of the schools, people get in trouble.
And risk being charged with.
Well, I just came across that at work because when we got bought out by the new company and we did our training, our trainer identified as a they them. And let me tell you, it is hard to use they and them as pronouns. So I just avoided saying he, her, they, whatever. I just called the person by the name. See, I still want to say him because it was a boy, but his name was Sid. But he wanted to be they them, and so I just avoided at all costs having to use any kind of pronoun.
But the
Because
fact
it's
is,
just hard.
but you could get in trouble for making a mistake. So you called him a he and didn't even intend to. And you can get in trouble for that because in postmodernism there is no room for mistakes. It's absurdity. It's not borderline absurdity. It is absurdity.
That's right, and it wasn't that both viewpoints were equal. One would be not,
Absolutely.
treated the same way.
And they're not treated because obviously what Rachel views is, but remember what we talked about. Remember tolerance, diversity. Those are the things that, in their version of tolerance, right? In their version of everything else. Those are the ideals, and everything else must fall to their knees for that.
Didn't matter what she wanted.
Right.
What she
Right. Absolutely. Brother Mike, would you dismiss?
Lord, we come to you to say thank you for this time that you've given us to come and be in your house and worship. Lord, we thank you for the words that we've received, and let us apply these things to our life, and we know where the true truth is. It's in you, Lord Jesus, you alone.
Yes.
And we ask you to please help us to influence others to come to that saving knowledge. And let us not be selfish and hold it just to ourselves, Lord. Let us spread it to the whole world. Lord, we ask you to be with those that are on our prayer list. Heal them where they need healing.
Yes.
And Lord, you know all that are even not on our prayer list that need your touching hands. That's each and every one of us, Lord. Please be with us now until we meet again. For it's in your holy and precious name we pray, Lord. Forgive us of our sins and Lord. Amen.
Amen. Shalom.